So this is all going to come together very quickly. So anyway, like I said, you're going for a very, very high heat. I remember a couple months ago when we did the scallops before, I showed you when the oil goes in the pan and it's smoking, most times that would be what you weren't going for. In this scenario, you know, it is. Not as heavy a smoke as when we're making scallops. But that's, you know, that amount of smoke, the smoke means the oil is at a very high point for its stability. You know, olive oil, this would have exploded. Canola oil, it can take it, which is also one of the reasons I like to use it. I believe you can use coconut oil is one that everyone's using right now. I don't really want any degree of coconut flavor on my ribeye, but if you are completely against coconut oil or canola oil, I would say that would be an alternative. So, I don't want this steak spread out. I want it nice and compact. And in order to sear, it has to stay in the pan for a while. So you don't want to get it in there and, oh, what's it doing? Should I move it? Should I flip it? Just leave it alone. When you hear that, you're doing something right. And then what's going to happen after it sits a while, you're going to notice that it's going to start to brown around the sides. You see brown on the sides, you know you have brown on the middle. But as far as right now, you know, we're a minute to a minute and a half from that. I like butter with my asparagus, but I finish with butter because I want this high heat. I want that high heat for the asparagus too. A lot of people like to steam their asparagus. I like to cook it right in the pan. That asparagus is raw. It's not been blanched at all whatsoever. So it's gonna start with, as long as you don't overcrowd your pan, you're gonna end up with some really good flavor. And it'll cook evenly. Now if I fill this pan up to here, I'm gonna have some problems. So that's oil and asparagus, and we're gonna forget about that for a little while. You know, this should have a really good sear on it. You know, that's pretty good. This black that you have here, you know, that's letting you know you're at about its maximum, you know, terminal velocity as far as how much sear you're gonna get on there. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Now the temperature is gonna go down. I wanted to make sure that I got a good sear. You want that crunch, that crispiness that's gonna hold up to the compound butter. The inside is gonna be, you know, mid-rare. It's gonna have that gelatinous texture. See how we're getting that nice brown on there? That makes for really great flavor on asparagus. So I put it in on a pretty high heat. You know, we're still seeing smoke from the oil. Now that we're starting to get some brown, we're gonna bring it down. And one thing about your vegetables, they're not gonna take a lot of, they're not gonna absorb seasoning until you start cooking. So I always say season as you go. With asparagus, in this instance, you kind of go and then season. A little bit backwards. So, but now that you're seeing some color start to come out in the asparagus, and I'm not just talking about the brown, I'm talking about the green. You notice it's starting to get a little bit brighter. Now we can get some seasoning in there. Okay? This here, this steak is rare at best, but it is very thin. And there is a lot of heat that is in the exterior of this. So if I cook that till mid-rare and then take it out of the pan, I'm gonna end up with a steak that's a little bit over medium. You know, if I cook it till rare and then let it rest, what's happening is you're getting what's referred to as carryover cooking. So this exterior was just sitting in a pan that was 300, 350, maybe even 400 degrees. So even though the center is only trying to get to 130, the center might only be at 115 right now. As it sits, that heat is gonna continue to penetrate. So, and what's great about ribeyes too, if you're nervous about your steak temps, the ribeye has this little lip that runs across the top. It's referred to as the decal. So like a strip steak or a filet, you really can't get a look at it. You know, you gotta have a meat thermometer or you gotta know what to do, you know, temperature, temp it with your fingers. The ribeye will let you cheat. You can lift that right up and take a peek at what's going on. So I would, anyone who's trying to learn to cook steaks without having to cut them, I would start with ribeyes because it's the one steak where you can say, you know what, what's going on in there? So it's a little bit under mid-rare right now, but that's gonna continue to cook. So this here It's starting, we're getting some progress. Now I can turn down the heat just a hair. Now we can put some butter in there. And I'm gonna put a few of these tomatoes in here. And what's fun about this cooking, you know, we're doing everything in a couple pans. Like this is top-notch flavor for steak, but so simple, you know. And we're gonna have more. Trust me. The next steak that I do is gonna be a couple tiers higher as far as complexity and technique. But it's funny, the steak I'll show you in a couple months, that's not the one I make at home. This is the one I make at home. It's simple, it's good, everyone loves it. And then here, remember when I was speaking about the fond in the gravy episode? I was talking about all the little bits that were left in there, leave them in there. Same principle here. Same principle here. Except instead of using stock like we did there, we're gonna take butter. And this is just raw, room temperature butter. I'm gonna use a ton of it, just so it's easier to see what I'm doing. And then in raw butter, you know, and I say raw as opposed to clarified butter. That raw butter has water in there. That water is gonna hit the bottom and it's gonna create steam. That steam is gonna lift all those bits of ribeye off, which is all flavor. And then that's just our sliced garlic. And we're just gonna let that sit at a nice low heat. And that garlic is just gonna brown. And our steak is resting. That's important. A lot of people think, well, I don't want my steak to get cold, so I'll make it last. You know, make your steak first, because there's a lot of heat in there. We want it to equalize. You know, a steak that has a 350-degree exterior, you're not even gonna be able to taste it. Your taste buds are most receptive around 120, 130 degrees. That's the threshold. So now if you look at these, we have nice brown flavor. There's good caramelization. Those tomatoes have just a little bit of brown on them, but they're not fully cooked. They haven't lost their firmness. I mean, that is just such a nice flavor right there. This is gonna keep browning, which I think we're gonna be able just to put this together. And if it's not quite there, just put it right back in there to cook. There's nothing wrong with a steak finished in butter, because that butter that's in there is for the steak anyway. Here's that baked potato. And I'm hoping, if Teddy, if you get close, let's see. I want to see if you can hear it when we cut into it. Yeah, do you hear that? You pick up, or it's gonna come from my mic. So you hear it, that is a beautiful sound. That is a perfectly cooked potato. And then you open that up, you have all that steam, but this is still nice and flaky. I mean, that's as good as it gets. And then here we have our asparagus. You know, this is gonna have such nice flavor. And then I'm gonna put a few tomatoes in there. It's gonna give a nice color. So I got the butter that's going on top of there. I got those little roasted garlic pieces. You know, that is just great flavor. And with that heavy amount of seasoning you did in the beginning and letting the meat, you know, sit for 20, 30 minutes, you probably don't need a speck of salt on anything here. So, not in any danger of being on, you know, Food Magazine, but that is a nice looking at-home plate. And you have some nice flavors. And I mean, this, you make the baked potato like this, it'll be one of the best 3 you've ever had in your life. And it's just funny how simple things like that can really be so great. You know, this is a great starting point that I think anyone who likes cooking steaks at home should try. So when we get into more advanced things, not necessarily more fun things, just a little bit more technical and complexity, you're gonna have that background. If you don't feel like doing that and you just like the entertainment, I'm still glad you were available to watch.